Twitterer here, who's very, very well known for twittering. Tweeting, is it?
Tweeting, I think, is a verb,
yes.
yeah.
I know, and he's been such a good friend to us and in Mirandanet for a very long time. We're delighted to see him. So, Matt.
Hello everybody, thanks for coming along. Matthew Pearson, on Twitter I'm Matt Pearson, and I did a session for Mirandanet it was about a year ago, and I started by saying that, you know, we went around doing introductions and not everybody knew each other, and they came to me and I said, I'm Matthew Pearson, and I've wasted the last 3 years of my life on Twitter. So I'm Matthew Pearson, I've wasted my last 4 years of my life on Twitter, that being a year ago. I've been asked by Tina to talk about Twitter and other professional development tools, and what I'm trying and do is outline both the positives and negatives. I mean, even conversations that we had moving in, it's clear that social media cannot be avoided. It's not a fad. It is definitely a new way that people are interacting. It's only going to get more and more intense. There will be new platforms. Who knows, maybe in a couple of years Twitter may not be the dominant partner anymore. There may be another platform, or Twitter may continue to be dominant. Twitter may well expand. There's rumours that Twitter's going to go to longer, the ability for longer tweets. People feel constrained by the 140. But the thing is with social media is it's here to stay, and it's going to be enormously important. So there's no point putting your head in the sand and thinking, well, let's wait for it to all blow over. It's going to be there. But so there's negatives towards that, because you can get in an awful lot of trouble with Twitter on both an individual and also an organisational level, and you'll probably get into trouble when you least expect it. Like the Spanish Inquisition, it'll be when you least expect the problem with your tweets or your Twitter account. That's when it will happen. But I'm also going to talk about the positives as well. Many people see Twitter as trivial. How could a platform designed to send very short SMS updates about what you're doing, so you've got 140 characters, how could that possibly be a professional development tool? We're talking about for teaching. We're talking about teaching as a very, very complex activity. We know that if you're a teacher, you really only get to be really effective after 6 years in the job. That's been proved by research. So that's how hard it is to be a good teacher. How could the ability to send a short piece of information have any impact on that at all, when often outsiders to Twitter say it's just people tweeting what they've had for breakfast? And I don't think I tweeted what I had for breakfast this morning, but I know that probably if you look back over my stream, probably at least 10 of my tweets today are what I would call trivial. So when people say Twitter's trivial, I say guilty as charged. I don't try and defend Twitter as some amazing grand scheme, because it isn't. Sometimes it is just people saying, I've just had a bacon roll for breakfast, it was really nice. And somebody says, I've just had a sausage one. How could that have any impact on CPD? Twitter is definitely a trap for teachers. Earlier in the week, on Wednesday, I went and heard Simon Finch talk. Simon Finch is SimFin on Twitter. Simon is definitely a guru on... Simon tells the most scary stories about Twitter and teachers, and all of them are true. Teachers who have used Twitter in ways that have got them into serious trouble, to the point of losing their jobs. People with very promising careers have more or less managed to ground their career into the ground by a few careless tweets. So if you look at a bear trap that you stand in and it gets you, and the act of standing in is very, very easy to do, but once it's got you by the leg, you are not going to get out, and it's going to hurt you a lot. You have to say that Twitter and other platforms as well, Facebook and all the other platforms that are out there, have a potential to really hurt you as teachers. And that's because teachers are obviously professionals, and because they work with young people and they have lots of parents who have visibility of them, then the standards of their behaviour is judged perhaps differently to others. And that's just a fact. You might have a debate about, well, surely if teachers want to go out on a Friday night and get drunk and take pictures of themselves in the pub drunk, what's the problem with that? Well, the simple fact is that if that then gets in the Daily Mail, they will be headline news, which they have been. And journalists and people are looking at people's Twitter account. If I could sum up Simon's presentation in kind of just one tweet, it would be tweet like your enemies are watching, which is very good advice, because if you sometimes you're going to tweet and there's going to be a problem. Nearly everything I say today I've written a blog post about. So I wrote a blog post a little bit back, I'll give you the address of the blog later on, that was saying that everybody has got a tweet in them that will shoot themselves in the head. It's just a matter of how long it is. It was a deliberately bleak posting, and I didn't mean literally shoot them. I mean, there's a tweet out there that has the potential to cause yourself serious damage. So if you look back over my blog, that's actually there. More positive, right? So I asked the question, how could Twitter possibly be of use to professionals doing something as cognitively complex as teaching? How could it possibly have an impact when it's so short, it's so trivial? Well, the answer is clearly I didn't really mean that, although I have recently argued that in a blog post as well, playing devil's advocate. The issue is Twitter can be an amplifier. So Twitter by itself doesn't necessarily have a meaning. It allows the carrying of other meanings. So you will see teachers having conversations on Twitter that, although they are limited by the 140 characters, they are sharing links, which clearly can be links to much wider content, to blogs and to articles. And because there's a rich context behind that, it's actually possible to have, even within the confines of Twitter, quite a rich conversation. So the amplifier aspect of Twitter is really important, because if somebody writes a very insightful piece of work on education, it could be in this country, it could be abroad, it's obviously international, but you get someone who writes something that's very insightful, it will get picked up. Twitter has its own kind of momentum, so the best stuff very often does float to the top. In other words, a very good piece of work, let's say a teacher writing a blog posting about their practice, that will get retweeted, it will get amplified. So you will have this thing where a message that before the age of social media would not have existed will actually be out there, possibly to tens, hundreds, even thousands of teachers. So Twitter works incredibly well as an amplifier. And I make a point on another slide, I'll make it now, that Twitter by itself is people tweeting about having eaten a bacon roll for breakfast. Where it becomes important in a CPD context is where it's amplifying other content that's been created. I started blogging 2 years ago, it was exactly 2 years ago, and I'd had my Twitter account 2 years before that. And I knew when I started blogging that if I didn't have a Twitter account, that nobody would ever read my blog. As it is, it's not the most widely read blog in the world. I mean, the average hit, if I post, I get, just to give you an idea of the numbers, I get something about 700 or 800 hits on a day that I post, and then it drops off to 200. If I haven't posted for a week, I'm down to like 10 hits. So this isn't like enormous. This isn't like some kind of amazing thing that everybody's hitting. But I'm happy with that, because I know that that people in the community are reading and responding to my work, even if they're arguing and saying, Pearson, you are so wrong on this, that you really shouldn't have a blog account. That's all valid. But I knew that I couldn't do blogging unless I had a Twitter account, because nobody would have read my blog and I would have become demoralised. Because all writers, they have a bit of ego in them. They want people to read their stuff. But once I had a Twitter account with, I think probably when I started, I may have had about 4,000 followers. And I'd worked pretty hard to build up followers of note in education, like Theo. Is that your amp? Does it go up to 11? So I'd worked on getting the people that really that I knew were very active in the social media world, and I knew that if I shared my stuff, that they would interact with it. So the general point is that Twitter by itself is about bacon rolls, but there is content out there that teachers are sharing, and Twitter is a brilliant platform for that, because it's completely free to use. It is very democratic. You can open a Twitter account and be online within seconds. And actually, the people who do a lot of tweeting, you wouldn't look at someone's account and say, well, they've only got 20. I sometimes follow people and they've got like 30 followers. And I don't think, oh, that's someone who's not very good at Twitter because they've only got 30 followers. Because numbers are totally irrelevant. They might follow 30 people that are those 30 people that are doing the things that they want. So somebody with only 30 followers may be using Twitter in an incredibly effective way. Somebody else might have 100,000 followers and likewise be using it in a really effective way. Numbers mean nothing on Twitter. What is meaningful is how people use it in the context, and it's incredibly democratic. And you don't have to ask anybody's permission to use Twitter in the way you want it. You don't have to go to your head teacher and say, I want to use Twitter in these ways, and the head teacher says, yeah, you can just do it yourself. You don't have to go to the local authority. You can find out online how to do it. So this democratization of CPD, which is definitely happening very quickly with social media, is very well kind of encapsulated in the social media world. Twitter also, believe it or not, focuses and clarifies. Today, if you're a teacher today, you clearly are in a world, a sea of very complex information. Not only do you have to teach your class, you have whole rafts of policies that are coming out at the national level. You'll have the policies of your school. There's so much out there that you couldn't possibly contribute to it. I chatted to someone yesterday who said they'd been around the BET show and they got halfway round and there was too much going on and they came out. They literally were cognitively finished because it was, and in a way the BET show is a physical embodiment, I think, of kind of where teachers operate professionally. They're not unique amongst the other professionals, may well be the same, although teachers do have this, they do have a layer of political people interfering in their work. And the more that politicians say they're going to leave teachers to get on with teaching, the more they actually don't do that. So if a politician ever says, I trust teachers, I'm going to get on with letting them do what they're best at, you know that that person is probably going to get on the classroom and they're going to micromanage every last thing that's there. So the thing that Twitter does really well is it focuses and clarifies. The good stuff floats to the top, and the conversations that are happen, and then a busy professional following the right kind of people can see the kind of things that are being discussed. And that's how I often use it. I'll go to Twitter, I'll go to a list, so I follow about 8,000 people, but I never look at my entire timeline because there's too much in there. I've got lists of various people built in. I've got a top 100 list that's only got 60 people in. I keep adding people in, but they've got to be really, I say good, not good, but they've got to really, that's a list that I look at because I want to see what's happening. So if something's happening that's interesting, I know that it will be in that list. And of course, a lot of teachers on Twitter are actually, they're refining those skills. They're using Twitter in a very, very sophisticated way because it actually isn't that hard. I mean, if I can do it, anybody else can, because I've only just spent, too long on it. Twitter is definitely democratic then. That's one of my central points. It's a democratic form of engagement, and that's why it is so powerful. It's almost a counterbalance against the kinds of control over what teachers do in the classroom, and maybe attempts to limit their freedom by telling them they need to teach reading in a certain way. They can teach it any way they want, as long as it's synthetic phonics, as long as it uses these patterns. You get that political pressure. Social media is almost a counterbalance to that gives teachers the freedom to explore what's actually happening. And I think that's one of the reasons why teachers are flocking to Twitter in huge amounts. There was a hardcore a little while back of teachers who were on Twitter who are still there, but many more are joining. Not every teacher who uses Twitter, it's a success. They might use it for a little bit and then abandon their account because Twitter isn't for everybody, but many of them are actually joining and making a real, it's making a real difference. And it's the fact that it's democratic and you can't control it. Twitter cannot be controlled. The conversation is happening whether you like it or not, which is, again, both the very exciting thing about it is power. It's also a scary thing as well, particularly if you're a kind of big brand. If you're Burger King, then Twitter's horrible today because you've got horses in your burgers and everybody's running away, probably making jokes about Burger King and Sugar King, I guess. And you can't control that. You can't shut that down. It's just happening. So it's scary for brands. Social media is really scary for brands. Not so much for individual teachers unless they tweet something clearly inappropriate. Can't be controlled. It's there. It's a rhizome. It's like something that grows underground and it's there and it's incredibly important. I argue, the last blog post that I wrote, I argued that Twitter is not professional development. And I deliberately set out to write that blog post, and even though I don't 100% believe it myself, I made the points I made early on in the presentation, that how can something so trivial as Twitter count as CPD? And if teachers count Twitter as CPD, what message does that give to the rest of the world, to the parents, to the wider public, and to the politicians? So what they would ask, you're professionals educating our children, and your main form of CPD is talking about bacon rolls. Now, clearly, I am obviously playing devil's advocate there. I am exaggerating. I'm putting the other side. However, I think there is potentially a danger of that, because some people tweet that Twitter is the best CPD they ever had, and I say in the blog post, the other CPD you must have been really bad, and you really have to think about what you're doing, because I argue that really great CPD has to be sustained, so you have to do it over a period of time. It has to obviously be kind of difficult. In other words, you're grappling with things. If you take Iris Connect and teachers sharing videos of their practice and exploring it, that for me is real CPD, because it's going to be difficult. I'm going to video my session, and then I'm going to share it with other teachers, and they're going to tag the content. We're going to try and figure out what happens, and we're going to spend a lot of time figuring it out. We're going to put in the hard work to figure out how we want to improve our teaching practice. Twitter can't possibly be that. Although we might refine our results back and then tweet about it. I think teachers blogging is hugely important. There are some great teacher blogs out there, some fantastic ones, and they're doing all sorts of things. People talking about their practice, people arguing about teaching politically. A favourite of mine is some of the anonymous teacher blogs out there where teachers are talking about the school operation, and they're actually anonymising it, but there's very powerful stories. So blogging is the kind of content that feeds into Twitter to allow this exchange of information. And again, it's absolutely by writing things down and arguing them that you get to where you go, which is why I also blog as well as tweet, because I can put out my views and then see what they came back. I won't classify it as hate mail, but when I posted the post about Twitter's not professional development, a couple of people DM'd me with, how dare you say that? Some people I didn't really know, only on Twitter, said, how dare you say that? Because it's like I was spoiling their party. And I was very polite back. I don't get involved in kind of flame stuff online. I actually said, well, you know, I might just be wrong. In other words, I've gone on and said Twitter's not CPD. You believe that it's the best CPD you ever had. We're just disagreeing. But clearly, people do feel very passionately about these things, and that's testament to the power of those kind of platforms. But I would say, if teachers as a profession, both in this country and also internationally, obviously with BET being international, if they're going to continue to demonstrate their expertise, and the problem with teaching is, the better you do teaching, the easier it looks. It's like the opposite of playing the piano, because if you play the piano really well, it kind of looks complicated because your fingers are moving all over the place. If you're playing chopsticks, people think anybody can do that. I can learn that in 5 minutes. Teaching is the opposite way around. A great teacher, if you go into their classroom, they may actually just be sat at the back with the students working in groups. Doesn't that look easy? So you just give the kids some task and you sit at the back? They're making it look easy. Now, what you don't see is how you got to that task, all of the work that the teacher's done to design that, the interventions they'll make, what they'll do afterwards. It doesn't look anything like as complicated as it is. So there is an issue with teaching, both in this country and probably in every context in the world, that the great teachers make it look easy, so people think, well, anybody can do that. Michael Gove thinks that anybody can be a teacher, because if you work in an academy now, you don't need to be a qualified teacher. So he clearly thinks that anybody can do it, because he's made that into a policy. So he doesn't think you need a particular band of expertise, or you need to be trained. If teachers are going to make their skills visible, which they need in order to retain the position that they have in society and the respect, and make sure that education is valued and the right kinds of education are done, then it's kind of activities like blogging and writing that are going to be incredibly important. So that's why I would say Twitter definitely is a great way of sharing content that's already been created and out there. So, Twitter is Matt Pearson, and the blog is just mattpearson.org. And I've redesigned the blog, so all the archive postings are there. There's about 3 or 4 postings. I mean, there is one posting from about a year ago saying Twitter is brilliant professional development, and now I'm saying Twitter is not professional development. So I can't make my mind up, but that's how it goes. So by all means, check the blog out, check my tweets out, and you'll be able to see what I've had for breakfast. So thanks so much. I didn't want to speak for too long because I wanted to just see if there was any questions or comments or people want to challenge stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, too many people on social media don't get the discourse thing. So if people are challenged, they think that their view is their view, and it's never going to change. It's immutable.
Yes.
And where it needs to move on, I think, in many ways, especially with chats online and stuff, is for people to have a bit of a discourse, a bit of an argy-bargy, come to a
rapprochement. Yeah, I agree.
I think it's a healthy state. Just that living in an echo chamber isn't very good.
Yeah. I totally disagree with that. No, I do agree with that. Yes, that's right. Sometimes if you can get into a club in Twitter because you can follow all the people who kind of agree with you, and then they can be all your mates. So you tweet something and everybody goes, yeah, and they all retweet it. And I think what you're probably saying, Leon, is yeah, you've got to probably move outside that and go into something that's more where there is a bit of argument, and then you do move around, because people do get tribal on Twitter. People, like, they don't have an argument, they actually kind of have a clash of heads, and then they fall out and either block each other or they just go away. There's a blog posting up there that says arguing on Twitter is like jousting with bendy straws. So you might want to read my thoughts about what it's like to have an argument on Twitter, and that's probably where we probably need to move to other platforms maybe for that. Because I don't know about you, but I think the things like the organised chats, the quasi-organised chats on Twitter, they do have some value, but they can never claim to go beyond the superficial, because people are just making the same point again. And if you really get involved, if somebody puts something that's challenging, you're immediately over your 140 characters, aren't you? You can't say, well, I really like that idea, but I think it's this and that, because you're out of, that's it, you've gone. And because the chat's moving quickly, you can't even break your tweet up. That's cheating anyway, to go 1, 2, 3. But even if you do that, it gets lost.
And it's hard for people to, I mean, it is the people at the other end, it's not the tool. But it's hard for people who maybe are coming new to it to be able to cut and paste stuff that they're actually, what people are doing are browsing.
Yeah, and then
cutting and pasting bits for information or for assets or for stuff like that. For neophyte Twitterists, it's really hard to multitask like that.
It must be absolutely daunting. Yeah.
You know, and it's gone in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's gone back into the ether. So. Right, so well, thanks so much for coming along. Do stay, and if your phones are flat, I'll give you 2 tips about this room. First of all, they've got coffee. And biscuits, and they've also got some phone chargers as well. So if your battery's getting a bit low on your phone, do stay. Do have a chat with the Iris guys, because they've got a fantastic CPD system. I mentioned it. I don't have any alliance with Iris, other than I'm friends with a lot of them. So it's definitely worth talking to them about their system. They'll be able to give you a quick talk through. And the sound system I'm using. That's Roger from Lightspeed. So if you want to chat about classroom audio, because this is lovely talking in here. I've been in another room working for the last 3 days that's been quite noisy, and although I've not been down on the show floor where you lose your voice after about 2 hours because you're shouting above everybody. I've been in an averagely noisy room, probably an average classroom, and I can feel my voice going in there because we don't have this technology. So Roger can chat to you about how teachers can get the most benefit from this.
Just turn around and speak to us. Just turn the other way and speak to us.
And speak like this.
Yeah.
Difference, yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Matt, thanks so much for that. I really can. You are writing a book, aren't you?
I am writing a book.
140 characters.
Well,
It's a bit of a